Grace and peace to you from the one through whom all things are. Amen. My daughter Rachel, when we were in high school, she came to me and said she was a big Bob Dylan fan, and she wanted me to listen to this song. And I knew the song. It's called "With God on Our Side." Has anyone ever heard the song Bob Dylan's "With God on Our Side"? Couple hippies in the crowd. Yeah. So, and I wondered why she really wanted me to listen to it. It was an important song to her, it meant something to her, but why was she asking me? And I read some of the lyrics. Oh, my name, it ain't nothing, and my age, it means less. The country I come from is called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there, the laws to abide, and that land that I lived on has God on its side. As the song continues, it keeps posing the idea, well, if God's on our side, then that means we're going to prevail, and God's going to bless our people and our country, and that ultimately leads to more violence. And so the song ends with, if God's on our side, then God will stop the next war. She was wanting to know, without really asking, Dad, you're a pastor in a church. Do you think God's on our side? And define our. Is our all of us, or is it just us? When I was in school, I was thinking about this, right? This is our country, and this is how I learned we came to be from sea to shining sea. It was the idea of manifest destiny. This, in my age, I don't know about yours, was taught uncritically. Why is it that we have sea to shining sea? It was because, well, God wanted that, and people believed that we were supposed to be able to move across the whole country. In fact, here's a piece of art that was painted to talk about manifest destiny. And if you can see, the painting didn't have that title on it like that. It was just called that. But you can see here you have the angel carrying the Bible as it's coming from east to west, there from the coastlands and all the train. And notice what's in her hand is the telegraph wire that she's stringing across the whole country, followed by the train and followed by all the different peoples. But yet in the far left part, you can see these native peoples looking up in fear and running away from them. You see, later on, as I got older, I would learn other parts of our history. And it was hard to reconcile this idea of what happened with the genocide to First Peoples here in the United States and this idea of manifest destiny. If it's true the way I was taught in high school, then that meant that God really was just about us. But I don't believe that. And the scriptural witness is not towards that. And so we look back to the scripture and we try and figure out, where can we find clues? I love this part of the last text. Here we have Abram, and he's lamenting. He's talking about the fact that he doesn't have a son from his wife Sarah yet. He does have a son. You see, Abram and Sarai decided that since they were having a hard time conceiving, that he should be with Hagar, her handmaid, and that maybe if a child came from that union, as was part of the ancient culture, that would be their son. And so Ishmael was born. Ishmael and Hagar were then, once Sarah became pregnant, they were driven away. If you read the Quran, it'll pick up that story, because the people who are part of the Muslim community, they trace their lineage from Hagar and Ishmael. But here we see in this story a lament, I don't have a real son yet. And then this promise, you will have a son, and from them you will have descendants so numerous it'll look like the stars in the sky. Look up, see if you can count them. That's how many your offspring will be. If this is meant in terms of look at all the generations of people, look at all the peoples of the earth, look at the diversity and the amount of love that God pours out in the world, then I love this verse. But if it means look at how many will just be in your nation as opposed to the other nation, we can already see the beginnings of what will become religious violence. And so then we have this next part of the story that Donna read. It's a challenging part. You hear that whole, very strange thing, get a whole bunch of 3-year-old animals and cut them in two? I mean, it's not a great St. Patty's Day text, but it's the one assigned for today. Cut them in two and lay them on the ground. And then it says that Abram fell asleep and a terrifying darkness fell upon him. And I wonder, what was the terrifying darkness? What was that dark? Man, what could it be? Because then there's this pot of fire and smoke that goes between them, cauterizing the two sides that have been cut in half and making a new covenant saying that this is now your land. And if you look towards a lot of people who are Zionists, for example, they will say, this is the promised land, from the river in Egypt, which is the Nile, to the Euphrates. And they say, this is the land that God promised the Hebrew people. And so we have then millennia of wars about this land. To whom does it belong? If you look in Quranic scriptures, you will see that they're also promised, unfortunately, the exact same real estate. And so what happens when you have two people with God on their side? Well, we have conflict. We have war. In September of 2000, I had my one and only trip to the Holy Land. I got there, and on the 26th, the 27th, we went up to Bethlehem, and we were able to go see that beautiful community. And then we came down, and on September the 28th, Ariel Sharon went up to the Temple Mount, which was in violation, because that's owned by the Muslim community. But as president of Israel, he decided he would violate that because he said a Jew should be able to pray on the Temple Mount. And it caused, in 2000, the second intifada, which is now currently existing. I was there on the roof of the Lutheran hostel watching this thing happen, and all the uproar was not very far away. We could see this happening. And you then had everyone rushing away from there because they knew what violence was going to ensue. A buddy of mine and I, we ran actually towards it because we wanted to be part of this history and see. And you could see the people from the tops of the walls of the Temple Mount throwing rocks down on the Jewish people who were praying their prayers up against the western wall. And there you have the beginning. And from the whole rest of the trip, everywhere we went, there was threats of violence and violence. When we pulled into Nazareth, we were told we had to turn away right away on this one street. And sure enough, here came the rocks and the bullets. The rocks being thrown by the Palestinians and the bullets being fired by the Israeli soldiers. All this violence about who gets to have this small little bit of real estate on the Temple Mount. And so it's in that context, and I've never been able to get that context out of my head when I hear this Jesus prayer. This, by the way, is the window in a church called Dominus Flevit, which in Latin means the Lord cried. It's a window that looks out from the altar onto the city of Jerusalem. You can see the Dome of the Rock in the background, and you hear Jesus' words. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you are not willing. Not willing to listen to the nonviolent message of peace that Jesus was offering. Brothers and sisters, what is this terrifying darkness? What is it about religion that brings out the best in us, but also brings out the worst in us? Is this what we're doomed to? That we are going to continually be in a struggle of the three great Abrahamic monotheistic traditions in which we have constant violence? Is this how easy it is to manipulate us into not caring for our brothers and our sisters? We know what just happened last week in New Zealand, in 2 mosques, where 49 people were killed by someone who thought that their religion and their race were supreme. This terrifying darkness keeps revisiting itself, as it did in the synagogue in Philadelphia. And that's just in the last, year of time. We could keep going back, and we could keep finding ways in which this teaching that seems to come in that says there's only one people that gets this land. We're chosen, and chosen means favorite. Chosen means more loved. But brothers and sisters, that can't be right. What if chosen meant something else? What if chosen meant, maybe if it wasn't such a privilege as a responsibility? Think about it again. What if we are supposed to look up into the sky and see in the stars the possibility of one people being just like the sky, full of stars, and then turn to our community and see all the possibility and potential of each and every person, regardless of whether they pray and to whom they pray and how they pray? Wouldn't then we be like what Jesus was saying? This is, by the way, a mosaic from an ancient church of that's Jesus as a mother hen gathering all of the chicks under her wings. Wouldn't that change our mission, or at least focus it a little bit more? There are, in moral development circles, when you talk about the psychology of moral development, there are these expanding circles of ethical concern. It's hard to read that there, but it starts with present people, then it goes distant people, future people, animals, living things, species, ecosystems. If we don't figure out how to care for ecosystems, we're all in deep kimchi, right? But you don't get there just one quick jump. You have to first start off with the people right near you. Can you care for the people right here, like literally sitting next to you right now? Can you care for the people a pew or 2 back? Can we go beyond that to people who aren't in church today? Can we begin to expand our circle to be people who we disagree with, not just loving the lovable and the convenient, but the ones with whom we have a problem with? Can we find that strength? Because if we keep expanding that out, we begin to find ourselves in Jesus' space, where he just walks out of the moral circles every single time when there's a circle drawn and says, these are the holy people. Jesus goes right outside of it and says, but what about this one? This one, this leper on the Sabbath that I'm going to cure. Isn't that what the message of Christ has been all about? This is the message of the world. The God figure blesses the one. The priests and the military support that ideology with manifest destiny. Then you have the elites and the administrators and the citizens and the slaves. And it becomes very easy to justify all manner of things, but this is exactly the message of Jesus. It's the beloved community. It's one in which we see people as people, and we treat them as all divine children. And so in that case, justice moves on beyond just us, right? We no longer see the way in which we care for the world as just caring for me and mine, but instead we begin to expand our circles until the circle encompasses everybody. The opposite is the favorite indoor sport of religion, by the way. It's like we decide, like in this case, like the people on this side of the church are the good ones, and the people on this side, meh. Right? And so you guys start looking over there, and you say, I don't know about those people over there. And then you turn around and you look at the second half, and the people in the front half think, I'm not sure about those people in the back half. Why would you sit in the back of a church? I mean, you might not be quite as holy as the ones from, say, Renee's pew forward. So these are the holy ones, right? And then you begin to start to look at each other inside, and you maybe compare stories about who's doing a better job of being more righteous, and who votes correctly, and who has the right litmus test of righteousness. Well, what's going to eventually happen is it's just going to be Chloe, right? Eventually, we're going to keep going down and down until it'll just be Chloe, all righteous by herself. But that's not good, right? And the expansion of circle is what we're supposed to be about. And so I have a giant homework assignment for us today. Today, there will be a prayer. This is the Islamic Center of San Diego. I went down there to bring greetings to them the day after the shootings in New Zealand, and Imam Taha was very gracious and said there's going to be a prayer vigil, and it's going to happen today at 6 o'clock in Balboa Park by the fountain, on the east side of the fountain. And if you would like to be part of the expanding circle, if you would like to be part of the beloved community, come. You don't have to bring anything. You don't have to do anything. But your presence alongside other brothers and sisters, children of Ishmael, says a lot about what it is that we're about. Says a lot about who God really is. Helps us to have the imagination of the stars of the heaven instead of the incredibly terrifying darkness of religious violence. This, brothers and sisters, is who we are. Diverse, different, beautiful, all holy. Amen.